December 17, 1944, before dawn settled over the Ardennes, Colonel Joachim Peiper climbed down from his fuel-starved Tiger tank into the frozen soil of Honsfeld, Belgium, realizing something was deeply, catastrophically wrong. His entire armored spearhead, 67 tanks, 149 half-tracks, nearly 5,000 Waffen-SS troops, sat silent in the mist, paralyzed not by enemy action, but by the same crisis that had haunted Germany for years: fuel. When Peiper found the abandoned American forward supply depot, fire still burning, coffee still steaming beside empty foxholes, he understood instantly that fortune had handed him more than just a tactical advantage. Lined in massive rows were thousands upon thousands of US jerry cans. His adjutant cracked one open and inhaled the unmistakable scent of high-octane American gasoline, an intoxicating smell for an army that lived on fumes. The men erupted into frantic activity, refueling vehicles that had barely crawled 20 miles into Belgium. But as Peiper walked through the stacks, counting and estimating, the realization crushed him. 50,000 gallons, enough to sustain his Kampfgruppe to the Meuse, meant everything to Germany, yet was only a fraction of American daily supply. The Americans had abandoned in minutes what German industry could not produce in months, a discrepancy so vast it defied military logic. 6 months earlier, Albert Speer had warned Hitler that synthetic fuel production was collapsing under Allied bombing. Plants at Leuna, Bohlen, and Brux were operating below 10%. Romania's oil was gone, refineries destroyed, rail transport shattered. German mechanized warfare was living on borrowed time. Meanwhile, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of oil in 1944, more than 50 times Germany's total output from all sources. The Americans supplied their front lines with an ocean of petroleum using the Red Ball Express and vast pipeline networks stretching from Normandy into Belgium. Peiper, a decorated Eastern Front veteran, understood modern war better than most. Tanks were irrelevant without fuel, strategy meaningless without mobility. His briefing before the offensive had included a warning. His Kampfgruppe had only enough fuel for 50 miles. The Meuse was 65 miles away. They were expected to make up the difference by capturing American depots. The plan was a gamble born of desperation. As the tanks refueled at Honsfeld, Peiper studied captured documents showing the fuel's journey: Texas to New York, across the Atlantic, through Liverpool, across France, hauled hundreds of miles by truck, all in a matter of weeks. Germany could not move fuel 50 miles without risk of collapse. The abundance stunned even veteran SS officers. Newspapers left behind by US troops celebrated a new pipeline capable of delivering 300,000 gallons per day, more fuel than Peiper's entire spearhead would consume in the whole offensive. Standing among the stacked jerry cans, watching cold gasoline splash into German tanks, Peiper understood something few German commanders dared admit aloud. Germany was not simply losing the war, it was fighting an enemy whose industrial capacity existed on a scale beyond German imagination. What he found in Honsfeld was salvation for his mission, but a death sentence for belief in victory. By the time Kampfgruppe Peiper surged away from Honsfeld with its captured bounty, the offensive's fatal mathematics were already unfolding. The Tiger and Panther tanks devoured fuel at a rate German planners could no longer support: 2.5 gallons per mile for Tigers, 1.5 for Panthers, even more in the steep, mud-choked Ardennes. The narrow forest roads created traffic snarls that forced vehicles to idle for hours, burning away the very resource the offensive depended upon. At Lanzerath, a single US reconnaissance platoon of just 18 men held up Peiper's column for nearly 10 hours, draining precious fuel from engines that could not afford to run. When the Germans finally broke through and reached Bullingen, they seized more American supplies, but the captured maps only deepened Peiper's unease. The Americans had depots everywhere, each containing more fuel than an entire German division received in months. That afternoon, Peiper's men reached Ligneuville and continued pushing west, driven by the knowledge that failure to capture more supplies would doom the offensive within days. Yet even with aggressive refueling, the numbers remained grim. Maintenance officers reported that by midday on December 18th, the Kampfgruppe had burned through more than 67,000 gallons while capturing barely 55,000. They were running at a deficit in an operation that required surplus. Meanwhile, American logistics were accelerating. The Red Ball Express delivered over 12,000 tons of supplies daily. Pipelines pumped more than 1 million gallons of fuel from England into France every day. US. First Army logs from December 18th recorded the receipt of 1.8 million gallons of fuel, issuing 1.6 million and adding nearly 250,000 gallons to reserves. While Peiper's tanks ran dry, American reserves grew during active combat. When Peiper's spearhead approached the massive US depot at Stavelot, containing more than 2 million gallons, he believed the offensive might still be saved. But American engineers had received clear orders: deny every gallon to the enemy. As the first German vehicles reached the outskirts, white phosphorus grenades ignited trails of gasoline the engineers had poured between the stacks. In minutes, the depot became a towering inferno. Flames climbed hundreds of feet into the sky, burning for days, destroying enough gasoline to sustain Peiper's entire division to Antwerp and back. Watching the inferno, Peiper's driver later recalled his commander standing silently on the turret, realizing the fundamental truth. The Americans could afford to burn millions of gallons simply to deny them, because those millions meant nothing to a nation drowning in petroleum abundance. Across the front, similar scenes unfolded. Spremont, Spa, Troyes-Ponce, millions of gallons deliberately destroyed. American aircraft, flying thousands of sorties once the weather cleared, consumed more fuel in a single day than Germany allocated to the entire Ardennes offensive. The crushing reality was now undeniable. Even when German troops captured fuel, it was never enough. Even when American depots were intact, they were destroyed before capture. And even when Peiper advanced, his spearhead became weaker with every mile. By December 19th, tanks were abandoned not from damage, but from empty fuel tanks. Peiper gathered his officers and bluntly acknowledged the truth. They had discovered an enemy whose logistical capacity made victory impossible. Germany had planned an offensive powered by hope and captured gasoline. The Americans fought with an industrial empire behind them. As the hours dragged on, the men aboard the USS Attic understood they were living inside a paradox, an armed merchant ship built to look helpless, yet carrying enough firepower to ambush a German hunter in the night. Every creak of metal sounded sharper. Every vibration pulsed through the hull like a warning. Reports from the radio shack confirmed that U-123 had not abandoned its pursuit. It was tracking them patiently, lurking just beyond visual range, waiting for the darkness to squeeze every last advantage out of the Atlantic. Commander Linwood kept the crew silent and disciplined, knowing the Germans were listening for even the smallest clue. His men whispered like they were in a cathedral. No boots slammed. No loose chains rattled. The Attic had become a ghost, drifting through black water as if holding its breath. The deception depended on making the ship appear wounded and terrified. To complete the illusion, engineers vented steam in uneven intervals. Deckhands staggered their lantern movements to mimic panic. And below deck, gunners sat perfectly still beside their covered weapons, listening to their own heartbeats while waiting for an order they might never hear. Every minute felt stretched, trembling under the pressure of anticipation. Some men prayed quietly. Others clenched their fists until their knuckles whitened. They all knew one truth. When the confrontation came, it would be sudden, violent, and final. Q-ship missions rarely ended with survivors. When night finally swallowed the horizon, the Attic cut her engines and drifted, letting the waves do the work. The silence became suffocating. Echoes moved strangely across the water, and each small splash sounded like something approaching. At 20:37 hours, a faint metallic noise carried through the wind, then another, and then a low hum that instantly tightened every muscle aboard. The sound was unmistakable: diesel engine shifting power, a submarine adjusting its depth. A lookout whispered down the voice tube, movement off the port quarter. Low silhouette. She surfaced. Linwood felt the weight of the moment settle across his shoulders. The trap was about to spring, but only if the Germans took the bait completely. One wrong movement, one premature reveal, and the Attic would be defenseless. U-123 crept closer, scanning the motionless freighter. Through the dark haze, the submarine captain saw what he believed was a crippled merchant vessel drifting helplessly. exactly the image Linwood needed him to see. Minutes passed like hours as the U-boat closed the distance, sliding silently across the water. When the first signal lamp flickered from the German deck, ordering the attic to abandon ship, Linwood leaned in and whispered the words everyone had been waiting for: "Stand by to drop the screens." The deck gunners leaned forward, hands trembling but steady, knowing in seconds their world would erupt into fire. Linwood exhaled once, calm and focused. The shadow of the submarine drifted within killing range. The time for deception was over. The moment of violence had finally arrived. The order tore through the ship like an electric shock. Canvas screens crashed to the deck, revealing hidden guns that seemed to materialize out of the darkness. The U-boat's crew froze in confusion, their signal lamp flickering mid-command. For a fraction of a second, the ocean held its breath. Then Linwood roared, "Open fire!" The attic erupted, 5-inch guns thundered, tracer shells cut through the night, and the calm Black Sea ignited into a storm of flame and metal. The first salvo smashed into U-123's conning tower, shattering railings and sending fragments spinning into the water. German crewmen dove for cover, scrambling to man their own deck gun, but the attic's second blast struck before they could react. Smoke poured from the submarine as sparks flashed across its hull. The submarine's commander ordered a crash dive, but the damage was already severe. The U-boat lurched downward, leaving a boiling trail of bubbles behind it. Linwood knew this was the critical moment. Either they finished the submarine now, or the Germans would recover and strike back with torpedoes. The gunners reloaded frantically, firing into the churning water. Depth charges rolled off the attic's stern, exploding with dull, underwater thunder. For several tense seconds, the ocean lit up with white foam and rising plumes. The crew watched, breathless, waiting for any sign that the enemy had been destroyed. But U-123 was not finished. The damaged submarine breached unexpectedly off the attic's starboard side, wounded but deadly. A torpedo streaked toward the Q-ship, slicing through the water with a trail that glowed faintly in the moonlight. "Hard to starboard!" Linwood shouted, but it was too late. The explosion slammed into the attic's hull with catastrophic force. The deck twisted, lights blew out, and a column of smoke roared upward. Men were thrown off their feet as alarms shrieked through the ship. The attic began to list, groaning under the weight of the impact. Still, Linwood refused to retreat. He steadied himself against the railing, blood on his sleeve, and yelled for all guns to keep firing. The attic's crew, dazed, injured, but unbroken, rose again to their positions. Shells tore into the submarine's hull as it tried to submerge, forcing it back to the surface. Flames erupted from the U-boat's bow, and German sailors scrambled desperately across the deck. The two vessels drifted closer, locked in a final, deadly embrace. A second torpedo struck the attic. This one ripped through the engine room, killing the lights and sealing the ship's fate. The Q-ship shuddered violently, her stern dropping as seawater surged inside. Linwood gave his last command: "Keep firing until the guns are underwater." And they did. Even as the deck tilted sharply and waves crashed over the bow, the men of the attic continued firing into the burning submarine, determined to take their enemy with them. In the final minutes, firelight flickered across both dying ships. The attic sank slowly, her guns slipping beneath the surface one by one. Across the water, U-123 slipped into the darkness, damaged but still afloat, retreating into the night. Moments later, the ocean fell silent, leaving only debris and drifting smoke. The attic was gone. Her crew vanished with her, swallowed by the Atlantic. But their last stand became one of the most violent and heroic naval traps ever attempted, an ambush fought to the final breath, with a courage that refused to break even as the sea closed over them.